The nation has launched its first homegrown spy satellite on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, successfully entering orbit and establishing communication with a ground station.
국내 독자 기술로 개발한 첫 군사 정찰용 위성이 스페이스X의 발사체 펠컨 9에 실려 발사된 후 무사히 궤도에 안착하며 지상국과의 교신에도 성공했습니다. Tell us more, Jason.
Yeah, so this cost an awful lot of money, but certainly worthwhile in what they're trying to do. It's supposed to be for surveillance of our neighbors to the north, and certainly was done with some help from SpaceX, as it was a part of the Falcon 9 rocket.
Let's have a look at the main vocabulary here. It says it's a homegrown satellite.
Yeah, when something is homegrown, it was created domestically, is the best way to say it. So basically, the satellite was made by people here in Korea rather than outsourcing, which would be the opposite to, let's say, a company in the US or somewhere else to create the satellite for them.
That's right. Homegrown, 여기서는 자국에서 생산했다라는 의미가 되겠죠. Homegrown satellite. And you could talk about homegrown other things as well.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be just things from outside of the country as well. As an example, if you have, let's say, like a soccer player in Korea, you might develop them through your youth system. Then you could say that that player was homegrown. You didn't purchase them from another team or, obviously another country, but it can also be from other teams or anything outside of your organization could be considered, brought in or outsourced, whereas if you develop them yourself, then you could be homegrown. Obviously, when it comes to, let's say, a vegetable garden, you could say these are homegrown tomatoes that I've cooked for you, or whatever, something like that. So rather than purchasing at the store, it was homegrown in your own garden.
And then it's quite literal in that sense.
Absolutely.
집에서 직접 기른 채소라고 할 때 homegrown vegetables 할 수도 있겠고요. 또 자국 선수 얘기할 때도 homegrown athletes 얘기할 수도 있겠죠. 자, 그 다음으로는요. It has successfully established communication.
Yeah, communication, obviously, we're talking about being able to talk with someone or being able to communicate. In this case, is probably through like radio waves or microwaves to establish a link between the ground station and the satellite. Now, to establish it, it means that you've made this communication.
Yeah.
You've started it and finished it. So now you can communicate.
establish라는 것 자체는 설립의 의미가 있지만요. 여기서는 뭔가 해냈다라고 볼 수 있습니다. Establish communication은 교신에 성공했다라는 의미가 되겠네요. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. The nation has launched its first homegrown spy satellite on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, successfully entering orbit and establishing communication with a ground station.
Heavy snow has brought chaos to parts of southern Germany with air and rail traffic blocked in the Bavarian state capital of Munich, with more than 40 centimeters of snow falling over the weekend.
지난 주말 적설량 40cm가 넘는 폭설로 독일 남부 지역 일대에 큰 혼란이 빚어지면서 바이에른주의 주도 뮌헨의 항공 및 철도 운행이 마비됐습니다. A lot of snow in Munich.
Yeah, 40 centimeters is quite a bit. That's over a foot. And 760 flights were affected because of the snow. Obviously, you don't want to be flying in heavy snow. It can affect the way the airplane flies, but also when runways are frozen or have snow, then of course, takeoff and landing are the two most important parts.
That's right.
When it comes to flight. So being able to clear the runway for these planes, obviously an issue as well.
That's right. 보통 이제 원어민들이 얘기할 때 자연스럽게 obviously라는 표현을 정말 많이 씁니다. 이게 이제 어떤 느낌이냐면 물론 이런 느낌이에요. 그래서 물론 이렇죠. 물론 지금 눈이 많이 쌓였으면은 당연히 활주로가 지금 비행기가 다닐 수 없는 상황이 물론 됐겠죠. 자, 이런 의미로 보시면 되겠고 여러분도 간간히 사용을 해보시면 좋을 것 같아요. 제가 최근에 그 손흥민 선수 인터뷰들을 좀 봤었는데 근데 거기 손흥민 선수도 이 단어를 많이 쓰더라고요. 그래서 obviously the players did their best, but obviously we're not quite happy with the results. 뭐 이렇게
Yeah.
영어 정말 잘하잖아요.
I guess that could be a crutch word. That
Yeah.
we'll use things like you have certain people that say like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I said, and then yesterday, like, so it's just a word that
Right.
people throw in every now and then. We call those crutch words.
Yeah.
And obviously it can be a crutch word as well. It's just a
Yes.
word that people tend to overuse when you're trying to buy an extra second of thought.
Although I know some people hate hearing the word like repetitively,
Absolutely.
but obviously is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's way more natural.
Oh,
sounding.
absolutely. Yeah.
자, 표현 보겠습니다. Heavy snowfall brought chaos.
Yeah, so chaos is when things are in disorder. They're not organized, and you imagine people kind of running around in, maybe not quite panic, but certainly not in an orderly fashion.
Right.
And basically, it just makes things all sort of messed up and mumbled and jumbled.
Yeah, exactly. 우리가 흔히 카오스라고 하는 그 단어를 영어식으로는 chaos라고 발음을 하고요. 혼란을 가져올 때 bring chaos라고 합니다. 그래서 정말 많은 눈으로 인해서 굉장히 혼란스러웠던 그리고 많은 항공편도 지연이 되고 결항이 되고 그랬던 독일 얘기를 하고 있고요. Air and rail traffic was blocked.
Yeah, when we're talking about air and rail, I mean, traffic is, like cars, traffic, roads. Like when we think of things being moved, we think of traffic. But in this case, because it's air and rail traffic, we're talking about airplanes and trains. So usually you don't really think of traffic when it comes to air and trains, because trains aren't usually blocked and stuff, and airplanes aren't usually blocked. But because of the snow, it actually did have some extra traffic issues.
That's right. Air traffic and rail traffic인데요. 이거를 하나의 단어 traffic으로 묶어서 air and rail traffic라고 했습니다. 항공 및 철도 교통을 말하겠죠. 그런 상황이 지금 꽉 막혔다, 독일에서. 이런 얘기인데요. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Heavy snowfall has brought chaos to parts of southern Germany, with air and rail traffic blocked in the Bavarian state capital of Munich, with more than 40 centimeters of snow falling over the weekend. Jason?
The U.S. has announced new regulations that aim to cut methane emissions from its vast oil and gas industry by 80% as part of a new effort by several countries at the COP28 summit to curb the super pollutant.
미국이 자국의 방대한 석유와 천연가스 산업에서 나오는 메탄 방출량의 80% 감축을 목표로 하는 환경 규제책을 발표했습니다. 이는 슈퍼 오염물질인 메탄을 줄이기 위한 UN 기후변화협약 당사국 총회 COP28 참가국 다수의 새 정책 중 하나로 제시된 것입니다. Tell us more, Jason.
Yeah, so methane is a big issue when it comes to greenhouse gases and warming the earth. And the U.S. is one of the big culprits of emitting a lot of methane. And a lot of that, it comes through their oil and gas industry, which is going to be trying to cut back considerably on those numbers now.
Yeah, 80%. That's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. They also say that cows
Yes.
are also responsible for a lot of methane. And I know beef is eaten a lot in North America as well. I wonder perhaps if that might become an issue later as well.
그래요. 자, 그렇다면 우리 표현을 한번 보도록 할 텐데요. The US has announced new rules that aim to cut methane emissions.
Yeah, when you aim at something, you're setting a goal. You're trying to say, this is what we're going to try to do. If you think of, let's say, an archer or someone shooting a gun at a target, you're aiming at the target's bullseye. You're trying to hit the middle of the target. That's what you're aiming for. You're hoping to achieve that. It doesn't mean that you will, but at least, you know, you have a target, a goal that you're trying to achieve.
Are you good at darts?
I'm not bad, but I've played with friends where I was like, oh my God, you're like so good.
Oh, okay.
So I'm nowhere on like a high level, but I do play on occasion.
Yeah, well, anyone who's played darts knows you really always aim for the bullseye, but, you know, aiming is one thing and getting it there is another.
Exactly.
Aim to do something.
Yeah, we often say easier said than done for things like that.
네, 무언가를 목표로 한다라는 뜻이고요. 아까 얘기했던 bullseye는 우리 그 뭐 다트나 아니면은 뭐 활 쏘기 할 때 가장 가운데에 있는 것을 bullseye라고 얘기를 합니다. 거기를 목표로 하기는 하지만 실제로 적중하기는 많이 어렵죠. 자, 그 다음 표현으로는요. curbing methane이라는 표현이 있어요.
Yeah, when you're curbing something, you're restraining something, whether it be a desire that you have. We talk about, you know, curbing your desire to drink or curbing your desire to smoke. Usually there's something that you do that you don't want to do. Then you want to curb your desire for that. In this case, we're talking about this super pollutant, about methane. So we're trying to curb the amount of methane that we're producing.
Exactly. 그 methane 발음 둘 다 가능하고요. emission이 방출이라는 뜻이 있을 텐데 여기서는 이제 뭐 배출이 될 수도 있고요. 메탄이 배출되는 것을 최대한 줄이고 제한하고 억제하려고 한다. We're trying to curb methane emissions. 미국이 이렇게 현재의 80% 정도는 좀 줄이려고 하는 그런 목표를 내세웠습니다. All right, here's the headline again. The US has announced new regulations that aim to cut methane emissions from its vast oil and gas industry by 80% as part of a new effort by several countries at the COP28 summit to curb the super pollutant. Let's move on to the next headline.
Leading music magazine Rolling Stone has released its 100 best songs of 2023, which include 8 tracks by K-pop artists such as Super Shy by New Jeans.
세계적인 음악 매체 롤링스톤이 발표한 2023년 올해의 노래 100곡 리스트에 뉴진스의 Super Shy를 포함해서 8곡이 K-pop 8곡의 K-팝이 올랐습니다. 그래요. 자, 이 내용을 좀 볼게요. 뭐 그냥 대단하네요. 뭐 8곡이나. Tell us more.
Yeah, some of the artists, as mentioned, Eugene 17, Twice, V, Jisoo, 50/50, aespa, and Jungkook, all a part of the top 100. Yeah. And, you know, I wasn't actually so familiar with these songs, so I actually went in and listened to each one of them.
Oh, yeah?
On YouTube last night. And I've got to say, they're all great. Especially, I actually liked some of the lower ranked songs as opposed to the higher. Like, I thought Spicy from aespa was a very good song.
Okay.
Flower by Jisoo I thought was not only a good song, but I really liked her choreography in the music video. I thought it was very clever, some of the choreography that they did in the music video.
This is Jisoo from Blackpink,
yes,
right?
Yeah. So I thought, not only were the songs, you know, great, I thought the music videos were fun and interesting as well. So, great year for K-pop again.
네, 지금 이제 뭐 뉴진스 같은 경우는 6위. 그다음에는 이제 아까 17, Twice, V, 지수, 50/50, 에스파 그리고 정국까지 멘션을 해주셨는데요. 순위는 뭐 다 다릅니다만 100곡 안에 들어요. 이제 국내 기사에서는 사실은 K-팝 곡이 9곡이다라고 하는 기사들도 있어요. 왜냐면은 한국에서 만들어진 일본 멤버들의 그룹이 있습니다. XG라고. XG도 이 롤링스톤 리스트 안에 들어갔어요. 근데 영문 기사에 보니까 뺐더라고요. 이제 K-팝으로 분류를 하지 않은 기사들이 있길래 저희도 뭐 그렇게 지금 일단은 영어로 전해드리고 있는데 네, XG도 이 안에 들었다는 걸 말씀을 드립니다. Let's have a look at the first expression here. And it's leading magazine.
Yeah, so when we say something is leading, it's acknowledged as being the best or one of the best, a top brand, essentially. So they're saying leading music magazine, Rolling Stone. So they're saying that, well, Rolling Stone is acknowledged as one of the best or popular or respected music magazines, which it clearly is.
It is, yes.
Yeah. I'd say Billboard would be another one, Rolling Stone, are sort of like the two of the bigger ones. Yeah.
leading이라는 형용사는요, 선두에 서 있다라는 뜻입니다. 그래서 굉장히 대표적이고 유명하고 잘 알려져 있는 무엇이라는 뜻이 되겠고요. track라는 표현이 있어요. So there are at least 8 tracks that you can say are K-pop songs.
Yeah, so a song or a recording is often also called a track.
Yeah.
And when songs are recorded in studios, they're often recorded on various tracks, sort of like a train track. The train can't go off the track. It's like this one road that they're kind of stuck on. And in the same sort of way, when you record songs in a studio, you might have like a drum track that it's set for itself, that only the drums are on. There's another track for the guitar, another track. So there's a lot of different tracks, and then they're all mixed into one track, which is your final song.
Right.
So it's just another way of saying a song.
If we get really technical, as you said, one track could be divided into many different tracks.
Yeah.
But in this case, it simply means a song.
Now, back in the day, we did have something called an 8-track, and it was another form of like a cassette tape. So now, you have CDs, MP3. A long time ago, we had cassettes and records. But even before that, there was something called an 8-track that you would put into like your car stereo system, and it played on a loop.
Interesting. 네, 트랙이라고 우리가 외래어로 말하기도 하는데요. 이게 여기서는 이제 곡, 노래라는 뜻으로 쓰인 거고요. There are 8 tracks that's from K-pop artists 이렇게 얘기를 하고 있고, 그다음에 우리가 육상 경기를 할 때는 그 각각의 레인, 이것도 track이라고 하나요?
Track and field.
그 경기 자체를 track and field 이렇게 얘기를 하죠. 그래서 달리기 같은 것들 이렇게 표현합니다.
And sometimes when a CD is released or an album is released, they might say this has 9 tracks on it. So there's 9 different recordings on that album.
That's right. Well, here's the headline again. Leading music magazine Rolling Stone has released its 100 best songs of 2023, which include 8 tracks by K-pop artists, such as Super Shy by New Jeans. And let's move on to the next headline.
A 70-year-old Ugandan woman has become Africa's oldest mother after giving birth via cesarean section to twins following in vitro fertilization treatment.
70세의 한 우간다 여성이 체외수정 치료를 받은 후 제왕절개로 쌍둥이를 출산하면서 아프리카 최고령 산모로 기록됐습니다. Wow.
Yeah.
Normally, when we think of, someone in their 70s, a woman in their 70s specifically, we think they would have experienced menopause, and so it would be impossible to have a baby. But no, according to this article, it has happened.
Yeah, and she's 70, so this is the oldest there has been in the continent of Africa.
Right.
But there was also a 73-year-old Indian woman who gave birth to twins way back in 2019, also via in vitro fertilization. So this new scientific process does seem to be available for those who want to have children despite being past menopause, as you mentioned.
Exactly. menopause는 폐경입니다. 보통 우리가 생각했을 때는 70세면은 폐경을 해서 아이를 출산하는 것이 불가능하지 않을까 이렇게 생각할 수 있는데 IVF treatment, 이 체외수정을 통해서 아이를 출산을 했습니다. So obviously it works in some cases. Let's have a look at the main expression here. This woman in Uganda gave birth via C-sec.
Yeah, when you're using via or via, as you mentioned, it's by the process of is the context that they're using it in here. You can also use this like if you're traveling, you might travel via train or via plane. You traveled via car. So what is the process that you're using in there? You can also use it as like a middle ground that you're passing through. So, you know, when I go to Vancouver, then I might go via Japan, meaning that I have a stopover in Japan before going there. Or if you're driving down to Busan, then I drive to Busan via Daejeon. I go through Daejeon to get there.
네. 무언가를 거쳐서라는 의미가 될 수도 있고요. 무언가를 통해서도 될 수 있습니다. 제왕절개는 영어로 cesarean section 또는 그냥 C-section 아니면 C-sec 아니면 그냥 cesarean 이렇게 줄이기도 해요. 다양하게 표현을 하는데 이런 제왕절개를 통해서 쌍둥이를 출산했다고 합니다. So she gave birth via cesarean section. It's not the first time she's given birth, but as a 70-year-old, it's the first for the African continent, as you said. And it was done through IVF. Let's look at in vitro fertilization.
Yeah, so in vitro is a process that they use when they fertilize an egg. So it's already a tiny embryo and then it's placed inside the woman. So she doesn't actually do the full process of the pregnancy, but this is sort of like a scientific process to aid a more successful pregnancy, especially for people that have difficulty giving birth.
That's right. In vitro fertilization, 줄여서 그냥 IVF 이렇게 약자로도 많이 얘기하는데요. 여기서 말하는 in vitro가 바로 체외에서 진행이 된다. 시험관을 통해서 된다라는 뜻이 되겠습니다. Here's the headline again. A 70-year-old Ugandan woman has become Africa's oldest mother after giving birth via cesarean section to twins following in vitro fertilization or IVF treatment. And that's it for today's headlines. Let's talk Christmas. All right, well, those are our headlines today. Let's have a closer look at those one by one.
The central bank has released a report that indicates the nation is set to reach negative economic growth by 2050 if it fails to reverse its accelerating birth rate decline.
우리나라가 현재 가속화되고 있는 국내 출산율 하락 현상을 반전시키지 못할 경우 2050년께 성장률이 0% 이하로 추락하게 될 것이라는 한국은행의 보고서가 나왔습니다. Tell us more, Paul.
Yeah, so this new report from the Bank of Korea establishes that in 2021 we had the lowest level of fertility amongst the OECD, the 35 countries there, at 0.81. And we're measuring this by the number of children on average that a woman has between the age of 15 to 49. We're actually the second lowest in the world. Among 217 countries, according to this report, Hong Kong is number 1 with 0.77 and South Korea is number 2. And what this means is if we continue on this path, if there's no change, no resolution, then we're going to be reporting negative growth in our economy in 2050. Our overall population will fall below 40 million in 2070. We're at 51 million now. And we could be in trouble. And the Bank of Korea is saying that the reasons why we have this record low birth rate, it's tough competition, it's difficulties in getting jobs, it's about the high costs of apartments, of residences, and also rising concerns over child safety. There are lots of issues about this. But the big issue is Korea's birth rate is going down.
Exactly. Theoretically, we all know this. It makes sense and we understand.
Yeah.
Less babies means less economic action and activities going on, and so less money. However, when it comes to the reality, we also need to have other things in store, policies perhaps, that spur on birth and you know, people having bigger families. But this is a really tough issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this report is perhaps a wake-up call from the Bank of Korea to saying to Korea as a nation and to the government, hang on, we're on a trajectory that's not good for the country.
Yeah.
Something needs to change.
Absolutely. Now let's have a look at our first vocabulary. It says that this central bank report indicates something.
Yeah, if something indicates something, it's showing it or it's pointing to it. For example, if you're a driver, if you're on the road this morning, you've probably used your indicators a couple of times.
And I did.
Yes. So on the way to work, you indicate that you're turning left or indicate that you're turning right. You're showing the person behind you and the person in front of you what you're going to do. So if something indicates something, it's telling us what's going on.
네. 인디케이터, 지금 운전하시는 분들 아니면 지금 운전해서 출근하신 분들 아마 오늘 아침에 한두 번쯤은 쓰지 않았을까? You indicate that you're going to turn right. You indicate that you're going to turn left. 바로 방향 지시등을 인디케이터라고 합니다. 그래서 이 깜빡이를 썼을 때 I indicated that I'm going to turn right or left 이렇게 표현하면 되겠고요. 이 등 자체는 indicator. 네. 이게 뭘 하는 거냐? 뭔가 알려주는 것이죠. indicate 한다는 것 자체가. 자, 그래서 이 중앙은행에서 우리 한국은행에서 보여준 이 리포트가 뭘 알려주느냐? 자, 아까 우리가 얘기했던 대로 출산율이 계속해서 하락을 한다면 2050년 정도가 됐을 때 경제 성장률이 0% 아래로 떨어질 것이다. 이걸 보여주고 있어요. It indicates that. And the next expression is that the birth rate decline needs to be reversed.
Yeah, it needs to go back the other way. It needs to go back to where it was before. In fact, if you've been driving again today and you've been parking, there's a good chance that as well as going forward, you've gone in reverse, meaning the car went backwards.
Oh yeah, I just realized both of the terms today have something to do with driving.
Yes, I thought it was an interesting example to
그러네요.
give.
네, 우리 후진할 때 라는 글씨 있죠? reverse의 약자입니다. 그래서 뒤로 가다라는 뜻이 있는데 역행하다의 의미예요. 원래는 reverse라는 것은 반대로 하다. 그러니까 계속해서 우리나라의 출산율이 떨어지고 있는데 이거를 반대로 올라가게 하지 못한다면 이런 의미로 if we fail to reverse the declining birth rate라고 할 수 있겠네요. All right, here's the headline again. The central bank has released a report that indicates the nation is set to reach negative economic growth by 2050 if it fails to reverse its accelerating birth rate decline. Let's move on to the second headline.
Indonesia and the Asian Development Bank have agreed a provisional deal with the owners of a coal-fired power plant to shutter it almost 7 years earlier than planned.
인도네시아와 아시아개발은행 ADB는 석탄 화력 발전소를 애초 예정보다 거의 7년 앞당겨 조기 폐쇄하기로 발전소 소유주들과 잠정 합의했습니다. All right, let's have a look at this.
Well, those interested in the environment will probably know that last weekend we had COP28, the climate talks happening in Dubai, and this is part of those talks. They arranged this. So the whole thing is to help countries cut their carbon emissions. It's part of the Asian Development Bank's Energy Transition Mechanism, the ETM program. And so, under this framework deal, it's non-binding that they've signed. It means that this power utility company is going to shutter their power plant by December 2035 instead of 2042. So 7 years earlier. This plant only opened in 2012. And it was expected to run for at least 40 years or so. So by shuttering it, by retiring it in 2035, that means we're cutting 15 years of greenhouse gas emissions from that site. So we'll have to see what happens. There needs to be due diligence done with the agreement. They need to see whether it's all going to be able to work out because, after all, Indonesia does need electricity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But certainly it's a good sign in terms of making Indonesia greener.
And that's the thing about the environment. I think now we're seeing some tangible action, at least a promise for tangible action to take place. But at the same time, as you said, there will be challenges.
There always are, but every step forward is a good step.
Indeed. Now, this promise or this deal has been made, but it's a provisional deal.
Yes, meaning it's for the time being. It's for now, meaning there could be another deal. It could change. We had the Argentina elections a few weeks ago where we had, until we got the full results, we had a provisional result. And then we got the actual final tally and we got the final result. So if something is provisional, it's for now, but it can be changed.
Right. 잠정적이다 라는 의미의 provisional. provisional deal이라는 것은 그래서 잠정 합의라고 볼 수 있겠고요. 그 다음에는 동사 to shutter.
Yes, if you've been walking out and about in a city in the middle of the night, you'll see a lot of shuttered shops.
Yep.
Meaning their metal shutters have been pulled down over the front of the shop because they're closed. So if you shutter something, you pull the shutters down, meaning it's closed.
And the opposite, of course, is when the shop's open, the shutters go up.
Yes. I don't know whether we have a word for that, though, in the same way.
Although you just have to explain it, I guess.
Exactly.
네, shutter라는 동사는요, 닫다, 문을 닫다라는 의미가 있습니다. 원래 의미는 그 우리도 외래어로 쓰는 것 같아요. 셔터를 우리가 영업이 끝났을 때 가게들이 타타타타타타타 해가지고 요거 메탈로 된 셔터들을 내리잖아요. 네, 거기에서 온 동사입니다. 폐쇄하다, 문 닫다. Alright, here's the headline again. Indonesia and the Asian Development Bank have agreed a provisional deal with the owners of a coal-fired power plant to shutter it almost 7 years earlier than planned.
Indonesian rescuers have found the bodies of 11 climbers after the eruption of the Mount Merapi volcano in West Sumatra, with at least 12 people still unaccounted for.
인도네시아 서부 수마트라에 있는 무라피 화산 폭발로 구조대가 지금까지 등반객 11명의 시신을 발견했으며 최소 12명의 행방이 아직 밝혀지지 않은 상황입니다. All right, tell us more, Paul.
It's a developing situation.
It is.
They're trying to rescue as many people as they can, but at the moment we know that there's 11 bodies have been found. 3 people were found alive on the volcano.
Right.
Some are saying there's 12 people missing. Another official put the number of missing at 22. We do know that 49 climbers were evacuated on Monday.
Okay.
And there were meant to be a total of 75 hikers on the mountain from Saturday. It's a dangerous situation because this Merapi volcano, it's been active since January. There were no casualties in the eruption then. But the issue with Indonesia, it's not just one volcano. They've got 120 active volcanoes.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it erupted on Sunday. It stranded these climbers. We're hoping they can rescue more. But certainly it's a desperate situation for those missing.
네. 아직 종결되지 않은 진행 중인 그런 뉴스일 때 It's a developing story라고 표현을 하죠. 자, 표현 보도록 하겠습니다. This was after a volcano erupted.
Yes, when we talk about something erupting or an eruption, it means an explosion, usually volcanic. However, there are 2 other circumstances we can use it. If your parents are very angry at you because you didn't tidy your room, your mom or your dad might erupt in anger, meaning they become explosively angry.
It's figurative then, yeah.
The other thing that I had on my nose this morning, I was wearing makeup yesterday. I was doing a shoot and had to clean it off, but it blocks your pores. So the side of my nose erupted. I had a spot.
Oh no. erupt가 이제 화산의 경우에는 분출하는 걸 얘기하고요. 사람의 기분이 폭발할 때도 쓸 수 있고, 그 다음에는 이제 피부에 뾰루지 같은 게 났을 때 보통 breakout 한다고 하는데,
Or an eruption.
네, eruption이라고 표현할 수도 있는 겁니다. 그게 마치 어떻게 비유적으로 설명을 해야 될까요? 피부에 있는 작은 화산이 분출해서
Yeah, it's like something has come out of your skin angrily, explosively.
Got it. 자, 그 다음에는 to be unaccounted for라는 표현이 있습니다.
Meaning we don't know where they are. We can't say. We're not able to find them or whatever the thing is. So, for example, if a student is not at school and their parents haven't called in to say they're sick, well, then they're unaccounted for and we have to find them.
네, to be unaccounted for 그러면은 행방불명이다 라는 뜻입니다. Here's the headline again. Indonesian rescuers have found the bodies of 11 climbers after the eruption of the Mount Merapi volcano in West Sumatra, with at least 12 people still unaccounted for.
An analysis from a non-profit climate research group has illustrated how cities around the world could be inundated, if not entirely submerged, if the planet warms to 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
지구 온도가 산업화 이전 대비 3도 상승 시 전 세계 주요 도시가 완전히 물에 잠기진 않더라도 침수될 수 있다는 것을 기후변화를 연구하는 한 비영리 단체가 시각적 이미지로 구현해냈습니다. Okay, so let's have a look at this.
Yes, so we have these climate scientists coming together and saying, we're in trouble. So at the moment, they're reporting the world is around 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than it was from pre-industrial levels. And in the coming years, it will break the 1.5 degrees mark. And that's a critical threshold, they say, where we will start, and the whole world, the ecosystems will start to struggle to adapt to these temperature changes.
Right.
And the trajectory we're on, which goes up to 2.9 degrees, could make some places unlivable and could actually submerge some cities. So we're already the hottest year on record,
Exactly.
2023. It's not looking good. If we limit it to 1.5 degrees, they're saying the sea level rise is still going to affect people. Something like 510 million people would be affected. But if it breaches 3 degrees, we're talking 800 million people could be affected in the places they live.
It's one thing to have the stats and the numbers and the words, but to actually have a visual image, that's another thing. And they have actually made certain images, and they're saying, you know, what this city could look like if it's partially submerged. And we have examples such as the Burj Khalifa in Dubai and how it would be partially submerged, or Peru, parts of the city there in Peru would also be, in Lima, I should say, could be submerged as well.
Yeah, I've seen similar reports in the past for the UK, for example. And the UK, for example, parts of London and all around the coastline, we'd see literally villages and towns disappear off the map.
자, 그래서 illustrated라는 표현을 바로 한번 볼게요. What does this mean?
If you've got kids and you've got books in your house, you've probably got books with illustrations, meaning they've got pictures that tell the story. So if something illustrates something, it's telling us about it. It's telling the story of it. So this analysis is telling us that cities could be submerged, could be put underwater.
네. You could talk about a report illustrating something without pictures.
Oh, it doesn't have to be pictures. You can illustrate with words.
But in this case, they actually did come up with pictures.
They do, and I think that's the clearest way to remember things, is to think about the illustrations from your favorite book, telling the story in a way through pictures.
묘사하다라는 의미로 쓸 수도 있는데요. 여기서는 실제로 그림을 만들어서 이제 세계 각국의 도시들이 만약에 이 3도씨라는 threshold를 넘었을 때 어느 정도 물에 잠기게 될 것인지를 시각적인 이 그림을 통해서 보여주고 있기 때문에 여기서의 illustrated는 그림으로 보여준다 이렇게 해석을 해도 될 것 같아요. 자, illustrate 보여주다. 자, 그 다음에는 some cities will be submerged.
Yes, if we have the prefix sub, sub, it means underwater, like
a submarine, yeah.
So submerged, if something is submerged, it is under the water. For example, when I went swimming when I was a little kid, I was always scared of submerging my head, getting my head underwater, because
Really?
I worried about getting water up my nose.
Can you still not swim?
Oh, no, I can swim now.
Okay.
But I'm talking about when I was a little kid, Sue. I've got Riz now, you know.
I see.
I've got swim Riz.
When you start swimming for the first time, it can be quite daunting to put your head underwater and submerge your body.
Yeah, but I tell you what's fun as a
Yeah?
little kid
What?
is getting one of those plastic ducks in the bath and you submerge it
Oh, yeah.
in the water and then watch it pop up.
Pub, yeah, exactly. Submerge라는 게 물에 완전히 이게 쑥 들어가게 한다라는 뜻이 있을 수 있거든요. sub라는 것 자체가 아래, 그래서 sub-zero temperatures. 그러면 영하권의 기온을 말하고 submarine, 그러면 물 아래에 들어가는 잠수함을 말하죠.
And for those commuting today, you might be on the subway.
The subway. 그러네요. 네, 우리가 지하철을 subway라고 하는데 submerge라는 것은 이제 물에 잠기는 것입니다. Not entirely, 완전히 잠기는 것은 아니더라도 일부 잠길 수 있다. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. An analysis from a non-profit climate research group has illustrated how cities around the world could be inundated, if not entirely submerged, if the planet warms to 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And let's check our final headline.
Korean football player Son Heung-min of Tottenham Hotspur has grabbed sole possession of third place in the Premier League scoring race with a goal against defending champions Manchester City in a 3-3 draw.
토트넘 헛스퍼에서 뛰고 있는 손흥민 선수가 전년도 우승팀 맨체스터 시티와 3대3으로 비긴 경기에서 골을 추가해 영국 프리미어리그 득점 순위 단독 3위에 올랐습니다. Tell us more, Paul.
I think fans were on the edge of their seats on Sunday. It was a wild game. It was taking place in Manchester, Manchester City's home ground, and we saw Son become the most amazing player. He's turned out to be basically one of the best players in the Premier League.
Yeah.
He's become the first player in Premier League history to score away goals against 4 reigning champions. So he was amazing in the match. That means he's reached 9 goals in only 14 matches this season. He scored 10 in 36 matches last season. He's 1 goal away from getting into double figures. And we'll see what happens. He's also become the second player in the Premier League to score a goal and also an own goal within the first 10 minutes of a match, which he did on Sunday.
An own goal is not a good one because you're giving the goal to the other team.
Yeah, but let's face it, he's an incredible player, and I find it wonderful how the UK have embraced him, and he's become one of the most popular players in the league.
맞아요. 우리 소니. 영국에서는 써니라고 발음하는 경우도 많이 있습니다. 어쨌든 이제 손흥민 선수 관련된 소식인데요. 자, 표현 첫 번째. He grabbed sole possession of third place.
It's SOLE to stop any confusion. Sole possession, sole meaning one or alone, meaning it's yours, and possession meaning you have it. If you have sole possession of something, it's yours. It belongs to you and you only.
네, 솔로의 어원과 같습니다. 그래서 혼자라는 뜻이 있는데요. SOLE, sole이라는 것은 단독으로 한다라는 의미가 있어서요. Sole possession of third place. 단독 3위에 올랐다.
It's also what happens when you buy new shoes.
Oh, the shoe sole.
You have sole possession.
Oh my goodness. 그러네요. 자, 그 다음에는 draw라는 표현인데요.
Yeah, we're not talking about pencils or pens here. We're talking about football or soccer, depending on who you are. And that is when there's no winner. It's when there's a tie. So 3-3, 2-2, 1-1, 0-0. Those are all draws.
I think you can also say 3-all instead of 3-3.
You can. It depends who you are, Sue. I like to say 3-3.
Okay. 네, 좋습니다.
You say what you like.
네. draw라는 것이 무승부, 비긴다는 뜻이 있어요. 그래서 3-3 draw 아니면 3-all draw 이렇게 표현을 하면 될 것 같습니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. Korean football player 손흥민 of Tottenham Hotspur has grabbed sole possession of third place in the Premier League scoring race with a goal against defending champions Manchester City in a 3-all draw. And that's it for today's headlines.
이제부터 헤드라인을 하나씩 자세히 살펴보겠습니다.
The nation has confirmed a highly pathogenic avian influenza case at a duck farm in the southwestern county of Gohung for the first time during this winter season, according to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs.
전남 고흥군에 있는 오리 농장에서 고병원성 조류 인플루엔자가 확인돼 올겨울 첫 확진 사례를 기록했다고 농림축산식품부가 발표했습니다. Alright, so let's take a look at the news first.
Yes, so they tested and then they did a follow-up test to confirm that this is the highly pathogenic H5N1 AI avian influenza strain. We had a case back in April this year. That was the last one we had, but we have this new one. But they're taking it very seriously. They've cordoned off the farm. They've implemented quarantine measures. Sadly, that means they've had to cull more than 20,000 ducks there. The other good news is there are no other poultry farms within a 3-kilometer radius of the farm because if there were any within a 500-meter radius, then they would have to cull whatever poultry were there too. So the government is raising the warning level from attention to serious. They're putting stronger quarantine measures in place. So farmers have to be careful, and we need to protect our poultry.
That's right. So let's take a look at the expression here. You mentioned that it's a highly pathogenic H5N1 AI strain. So when we're talking about pathogenic. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, the only time you're likely to use this is when you're reading the news or talking to a doctor.
Right.
But what it means is this medical term, which means it's a bacteria or a virus or some kind of microorganism that causes disease.
Right.
So when we're talking about colds, flus, or avian influenza, these are all pathogenic strains.
So 이게 발병을 시키는 어떤 바이러스 그런 거를 얘기를 할 때 pathogenic이라는 표현을 쓰고 있죠. 그래서 보통은 이게 저희가 일상 대화할 때는 많이 쓰이지는 않는데 이 뉴스 같은데 이런 특히 어떤 병이 발병을 했다 이런 표현을 쓸 때 많이 쓰이는 단어이고요. 그리고 it happened, you mentioned that there weren't a lot of other poultry farms nearby, which is a good thing, but it was in a rural area.
Yes, rural, R-U-R-A-L, a much nicer word and a word that you can use much more in normal conversation. It means an area which is just countryside. There may be a village, there may be a few houses or farms, but it's not a town, it's not a city. When I think of rural, there's one film that comes to mind, and that's the brilliant Little Forest.
Little Forest.
I don't know whether you've seen that,
No,
but it's
I
an
haven't.
amazing film about a hannock in a rural area, and the daughter returns and thinks of her mother, and it's pastoral and countryside and wonderful, and I want to move to the countryside now.
Yeah, so 사람들이 많이 살지 않는 그런 시골 마을 얘기할 때 rural, it's hard to pronounce.
It is a difficult word to
because of
pronounce.
the two R's.
Yeah, rural.
Rural, right? So maybe the opposite expression could be urban.
Yes, and then we have one in between. We have urban, meaning of the city. We have suburban, meaning sort of around the city on the outskirts, and then we have rural.
맞아요. All right, so do you have an example sentence?
Oh, Karen, the older I get, the more I long for a rural life.
Alright. 그러니까 더 이제 나이가 들수록 이 더 전원 생활이라고 하죠. 이 시골에 가서 살고 싶은 그런 마음이 든다. 이런 문장을 만들어 주셨습니다.
Just want a little garden with a persimmon tree, Karen.
근데 저도 그런 것 같아요. 저도 이게 어렸을 때는 잘 몰랐는데 조금 나이가 들수록 식물이 그렇게 좋더라고요.
Yeah, I think it's something humans crave nature, but when we're young, we like the busy, bright lights of the city. As we get
맞아요.
older, we want to get back in touch with the earth.
그래서 지금 약간 중간인 것 같아요. 도시도 좋은데 식물도 좋고 그래서 약간 텃밭 같은 게 있으면 좋을 것 같아요. Alright, so 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. The nation has confirmed a highly pathogenic avian influenza case at a duck farm in the southwestern county of Gohung for the first time during this winter season, according to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. All right, let's move on to the second headline.
That, this could cause problems because there's a potential for rapid spread among children in schools and in preschools. And pediatric facilities, clinics and hospitals are already facing staffing shortages. And so if there is a surge in infections, then there could be serious disruptions in care for children.
맞아요. 이미 지금 독감이 유행을 하고 있기 때문에 병원에서 환자들을 이미 많이 보고 있고 그래서 지금 이 환자 수가 늘어나면서 그 진료 대란이 될 수 있다고, 진료 대란이 올 수 있다고 이런 우려가 커지고 있다는 그런 얘기인데요. 이런 우려를 제기를 하고 있다 이런 표현이 쓰였는데 raising concerns.
Yeah, if something or someone raises concerns, they're pointing out the concerns to us. So it could be that we see something that raises concerns. Like if I see a broken paving slab on the pavement, I think, well, that could be dangerous. Someone might trip over that. And that might prompt me to call the council.
Right.
But it might also be you yourself. You see something and you say to your boss, excuse me, I've got a concern I'd like to raise. I'm raising a concern about this issue or this person or whatever it may be.
Right. 그러니까 본인이 이제 내가 이런 문제가 있을 것 같아요. 이게 조금 우려됩니다 하고 제가 직접 할 수도 있고 아니면은 있는 문제에 대해서 제기를 할 수도 있는 거죠. Could you give us a sentence?
Look, Karen, I've been raising concerns about the health and safety policies of our company. But nobody listens.
우리 회사에 이런 건강이나 안전 문제, 안전에 대해서 계속해서 이런 우려를 제기를 했는데 아무도 내 얘기를 들어주지 않는다. 이런 얘기죠.
Yeah, I should say that's not the case at EBS.
Oh,
EBS
no.
is great.
Right. We mask up. We take care to make sure that everyone is healthy and safe here at EBS. 그 다음에 이제 이 아이들과 관련된 기사였는데 we talked about the expression pediatric care.
Yes, so pediatric is to do with children. So you may have also heard the term pediatrician,
Right.
which is a doctor who treats children. So pediatric care is all about treating minors. So we're talking about children and teenagers because, well, their bodies are different to adults and sometimes they need a different approach or different medical care.
맞죠. 그 아이들 그리고 청소년들은 또 어른과 몸이 다르고 또 이런 약 처방할 때도 다르고 그러기 때문에 전문 의를 찾아야 하는데 한국에서는 소아청소년과라고 하고 또 외국에서는 이제 pediatrician 한테
Yes.
간다고 하고 이 아이들이 필요한 그런 care 이런 그 진료는 pediatric care이라고 합니다. 네, 그러면 한번 다시 이제 기사를 읽어보겠습니다. The number of children diagnosed with mycoplasma pneumonia has continued to surge across the country, raising concerns of an epidemic that could lead to a pediatric care crisis.
The world's first self-driving buses have begun operating in Seoul, covering a nearly 10-kilometer route that links two of the capital's busiest districts from late night to early morning.
세계 최초 자율주행 버스가 서울에서 운행을 시작했습니다. 이 버스는 심야부터 새벽까지 시내 번화가 두 곳을 잇는 약 10km 노선을 오가게 됩니다. Let's take a compact look at the news first.
This is exciting. We got these two buses. They're the A21, and they started on Monday. They go from Hongdae through to Dongdaemun, which are two of Seoul's busiest areas, and there are 20 stops there. And they're going to be operating only on weekdays from 11:30 p.m. through to 5:10 a.m. So it's a 10-kilometer route, and there's going to be an interval of about 70 minutes. And it's the first time. Seoul City have said this is the first time in the world that self-driving buses are being used exclusively for this regular nighttime public transportation route. The thing is, because of safety and because it's the first time, you need to wear a seatbelt.
Yeah.
So if you go on this bus, you can't stand, you have to sit, and you have to put a seatbelt on. And the other really good news is, for the moment, they're free. So they are going to be turned into a paid service in the first half of next year once it's all stabilized. But for the moment, you can ride for free as long as you put your seatbelt on.
Yeah.
And Seoul City is also looking at expanding the route and introducing other self-driving buses on other routes, especially long-haul routes linking city centres to suburbs. We'll see how it goes because it's the first time we've had something quite like this.
Yeah, it's really exciting actually. And you might be wondering, so if it's a self-driving bus, are there bus drivers on the bus? Yes, there is actually a bus driver that is there, but he's just sitting there.
Yeah, he's not a driver, he's sort of a bus sitter.
Yeah, so he's a bus sitter. I think he makes sure everyone's seated, everyone has their seatbelt on, and I heard he does a little show where he kind of waves his hands to make sure he's actually not driving.
Fantastic. And it's really good that they have someone there because you never know what might happen and you need to have a human in charge to be responsible just in case.
Right, just in case. And just for, I think for the sake of feeling safe, because, we do know that we have the technology, but I think some people just feel nervous just in case something happens.
Yeah, I think as the technology develops and as we get more of these buses, we'll learn, what is the right way to use them, how safe they can be, and then maybe, I don't know, Mr. Bus Sitter will have to go and sit in the passenger seat.
네, 버스iter이라는 표현은 이제 베이비시터이라는 표현이랑 비슷한 표현이죠. 그러니까 운전 기사이기는 한데 여기서는 운전을 직접 하고 있지 않기 때문에 버스iter 버스를 약간 돌봐주는 그런 역할을 하는 기사분이 앉아 계신 거죠. 네, 여기서 표현 이제 한번 살펴볼게요. Self-driving.
Yeah, this is a term we've heard more and more over the past few years. If a car or another kind of vehicle is self-driving, it drives by itself. It doesn't need a driver. Like you have a plane goes on autopilot sometimes.
Right.
The pilots can
I heard most times.
sit back and relax for some time. So self-driving vehicles is a term we're hearing a lot more. It means basically you don't need to touch the the wheel.
Right, right. 그래서 자율주행 이제 차가 스스로 자기 혼자서 기사가 이제 운전하는 사람이 운전을 하지 않고 자기 혼자서 운전을 할 때 자율주행이라는 표현이 self-driving이고요. 그다음에 이 route는 발음이 여러 가지가 있어요. You can say route, you can say route.
Well,
How do
you say route, I say route.
Yeah.
It's British English, American English. Both are correct. Just pick the one you like and stick to it.
Or you can say both.
Sure, but I think if as an English learner, it's good to sort of
stick
get one
with
in your
one.
head, and then
맞아요.
later you can play around. So whether you say route or route, it's the direction you're going, the path of your journey, whatever it may be. So we talk about my route to work
Yeah.
or my route to school, and that will be the regular streets you take to get where you need to go.
맞아요. 어떤 정해진 길, 매일 가는 길, 뭐 또는 한 곳에서 다른 곳으로 갈 때 그 정해진 어떤 경로나 루트를 얘기할 때 루트라고 얘기를 하는데요. Can you give us your example sentence?
My usual route to work takes me 45 minutes or so.
그래서 평소에 일하러 갈 때, 출근할 때 걸리는 시간이 한 45분 정도 걸린다 이런 얘기죠. 한번 다시 읽어보겠습니다. The world's first self-driving buses have begun operating in Seoul, covering a nearly 10-kilometer route that links two of the capital's busiest districts from late night to early morning.
I've got you saying route now.
Yeah. I think I go back and forth. Sometimes I say route, sometimes I say route. Okay, let's move on to the next headline.
Italy has refused a request by the German State Antiquities Collection in Munich to return an ancient Roman statue that was purchased by Adolf Hitler in 1938, calling it a national treasure.
아도프 히틀러가 1938년에 구입했던 고대 로마 조각상을 돌려달라는 독일 국립고미술박물관의 요청에 이탈리아는 해당 조각상이 자국의 국보라며 이를 거절했습니다. All right, let's take a compact look at the news first.
Yeah, we're talking about the Discobolus Palombara, this statue, which was actually a 2nd century Roman copy of what was a long-lost Greek bronze statue. Hitler bought it from a private Italian owner in 1938. The thing is, the education minister and cultural officials in Italy did not want that to happen.
Right.
But the dictator of the time, Benito Mussolini, put pressure on them and Hitler was able to take the statue away. And this is one of the works that was returned to Italy in 1948 as part of this collection that Nazis had illegally obtained.
Yeah.
The issue is that the base of the statue is still at the Antikensammlungen State Antiquities Collection in Munich. And the National Rome Museum asked for it back.
Right.
We want the base back. And the German Museum instead said, well, we want the statue back because you illegally transported it to your country back in 1948. So now we've got this big issue, a big cultural contretemps, a big argument, because Italy's culture minister is saying this was obtained fraudulently by Hitler. It's part of our national heritage. It belongs in Italy.
Right. It seems Hitler was kind of mesmerized. 오늘 표현 홀렸다 이런 표현은 있었잖아요. 무마 문장에서. 근데 이 조각상을 굉장히 좋아했나 봐요. 그래서 이거를 갖기 위해서 굉장히 큰 노력을 들여서 그 당시에 이제 이탈리아에서는 이걸 주기 싫었는데 the dictator put pressure on the cultural minister and they ended up giving it to him or selling it to him, I guess.
Yes, and we're having this issue in the last few years, I think, in the UK too, with the Elgin marbles. There are countries who are saying, well, actually, what you have belongs in our country because it's our national treasure.
Yeah.
And we seem to be entering a period where maybe the national treasures of the country should be in the country where they belong.
Right, right. All right, so let's take a look at some of the expressions that were used here.
No, I don't want to.
You don't want to?
No.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about here. You are refusing
I am.
to take a look at our expressions here.
I'm saying no, Karen. I'm not going to do it.
That's exactly what it means, to refuse.
Yeah, so if you refuse something, like you could refuse a gift, I don't want that. Or you can refuse to do something.
Right.
I don't want to do that. You're basically saying no to whatever is being asked of you.
That's right. 그래서 뭐를 거부하다 또는 거절하다 이런 얘기인데 can you give us your example sentence?
I refused the free gifts from the restaurant. I have no more room for junk.
I never refuse free gifts.
Yeah, but when you have 15 bottle openers in your kitchen drawer,
true,
it's
true.
time to think carefully.
That's right. Okay, I refuse the free gifts from the restaurant. 어떤 식당에 갔을 때 보통 경품 행사 이런 거 있을 때 가끔 갔다가 이런 무료 경품 주실 때가 있잖아요. 근데 I refuse them. 그걸 거절했다 이런 얘기죠. 요즘에 약간 그 미니멀 라이프 물건 정리하는 거 유행이잖아요. 그래서 이제 물건을 정리하고 싶을 때는 이런 것도 받아오지 않는 게 좋습니다. And we also take a look at the expression antiquities.
I won't refuse to answer this, I will tell you.
Okay.
Old things, basically old precious things.
맞아요.
Antiques and antiquities, these are things of value from a long time ago, be it a few hundred years or maybe even a few thousand years.
네, antique 그러면은 그냥 이제 좀 오래된 골동품 이런 느낌이 드는데 antiquities 그럼 뭔가 진짜 박물관에 있어야 되는 그런
Yeah,
물건
it's
같아요.
much more valuable, much more precious, much more important.
오케이, 그래서 유물, 골동품 이럴 때 antiquities라는 표현이 쓰입니다. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Italy has refused a request by the German State Antiquities Collection in Munich to return an ancient Roman statue that was purchased by Adolf Hitler in 1938, calling it a national treasure.
Temperatures in parts of Siberia have plummeted to minus 56 degrees Celsius, while blizzards have blanketed Moscow in a record snowfall as winter weather sweeps across Russia.
겨울 날씨가 러시아 전역을 휩쓸면서 시베리아 일부 지역의 기온이 섭씨 영하 56도까지 떨어진 한편 기록적인 폭설량을 보인 모스크바는 눈 폭풍에 휩싸였습니다. 저희는 요즘 좀 날씨가 따뜻한데 한번 뉴스 살펴보시죠.
Yes, we should say that the area in Siberia we're talking about is home to one of the world's coldest cities.
Yes.
It's normally getting cold. Yakutsk is the one of the world's coldest cities, and there temperatures were falling below minus 50 degrees. In Oymyakon, which is one area near there, minus 56 degrees Celsius was recorded on Monday evening. And the real feel, Russian forecaster was saying, was probably more like minus 60 degrees Celsius because of the wind, the humidity, and that temperatures were going to get lower. So this region, almost all of the Sakha region is in the permafrost zone. And so they're seeing very, very, very cold temperatures, but it's not just there. We're seeing snowfall in Moscow. On December 3rd, there was one of the biggest snowfalls ever seen. More than 35 centimeters of snow in just one day.
Oh,
and
wow.
temperatures already in Moscow and around that region were expected to get to minus 20 degrees this week. So it's a lot colder there than it is here.
그 지역은 그러니까 원래 굉장히 추운 지역이기는 한데 그 최근에 글로벌 워밍 뭐 이런 것 때문에 조금 온도가 올라갔었다가 다시 이제 조금 추워진 거라고 얘기를 하죠. 그래서 I don't know. I've never been anywhere that was minus 50, 60 degrees.
No, I think in Seoul, I think the lowest I've got to is about minus 20, and that's cold enough for me. I don't need to go any lower.
I remember hearing, I think it was last year when it got really cold, they were saying this is colder than Siberia.
Yeah.
Because last year I heard it was pretty mild there, but I guess this year I heard it was because of Arctic oscillation that they're experiencing this kind of cold, but it's supposed to be cold there.
Yeah, and it's going to be cold here for another couple of months, so wrap up warm.
Stay warm, everyone. Let's take a look at the expression. The temperatures have plummeted.
Yes, meaning they have fallen a lot. There's been a steep drop, a severe drop. If something plummets, it's going down and down and down, like when you drop something from a great height.
Right. So when you're dropping something from like a cliff.
Yeah.
We see this in the news a lot when we talk about, when we see falls in stock market prices.
Absolutely. Weather, stocks, anything to do with numbers. Plummet are used a lot to mean this big drop.
A big drop. 뭔가 굉장히 많이 급격하게 떨어질 때 급락하다 이런 표현을 쓸 때 plummet이라는 표현을 쓰는데 그 뉴스에서는 보통은 뭐 증시나 그런 날씨, 어떤 숫자에 관련된 표현을 얘기를 할 때 plummet이라는 표현이 많이 쓰이고요. Can you give us our example sentence?
Our ratings have plummeted.
Oh dear.
I think it's the end for our TV show, Karen.
저희 이제 방송에서는 이런 표현 되게 듣기 싫어하는 표현이잖아요.
Yeah, sorry, KP special's getting cancelled.
그래서 ratings 하면은 뭐 시청자 그 시청률 얘기를 하는 건데 ratings have plummeted. 그럼 시청률이 곤두박질을 쳤다. I think it's the end of our TV show. 우리 프로그램이 이제 곧 있으면 없어지겠다,
Yeah,
사라지겠다.
morning
이런
special
얘기죠.
will continue, but the KP special is done.
네, 그다음에 sweep across 이런 표현이 있었어요.
Yeah, when we talk about sweep across when something is moving across a large area quickly, if you think of a big broom and the action of a big broom as it sweeps across the floor, it's covering a large area all at once.
그렇죠. 어떤 넓은 지역을 이렇게 휩쓸고 갈 때 이런 표현이 쓰이는데 그 선생님 말씀하신 것처럼 그 저희가 청소할 때 쓰는 broom, 그 청소 도구죠. 그런 거를 생각하시면 이렇게 넓은 지역을 이렇게 쓸고 지나간다 이런 표현을 생각하시면 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 sweep across 무엇을 휩쓸다 이런 표현입니다. 한번 다시 읽어볼게요. Temperatures in parts of Siberia have plummeted to minus 56 degrees Celsius, while blizzards have blanketed Moscow in a record snowfall as winter weather sweeps across Russia. And those were today's headlines. 이제부터 헤드라인을 하나씩 자세히 살펴보겠습니다. Right?
South Korean 15-year-olds were among the top performers in mathematics, reading, and science among their peers from OECD member nations, according to the latest report by the organization's Program for International Student Assessment.
경제협력개발기구 OECD가 주관한 올해 국제 학업 성취도 평가에서 우리나라 만 15세 학생들의 읽기, 수학, 과학 소양이 OECD 회원국 중 최상위권인 것으로 나타났습니다. Let's have a compact look at the news first. Can you tell us more about it?
So this was a report, this is based on 2022 information here, and they measured the ability of 15-year-olds from a total of 81 countries. So it wasn't just the OECD countries. And Korean students did very, very well. Nearly 7,000 Korean students participated in this survey from over 180 schools across the country. Among the students surveyed from all countries, Korean students ranked between 3rd and 7th in math, between 2nd and 12th in reading, and 2nd and 9th in science. And that's from all countries around the world. If we just look at the 37 OECD member nations, Korean students did even better. They came in between 1st and 2nd in math, 1st and 7th in reading, and 2nd and 5th in science.
I'm not surprised.
No, not at all. I'm not surprised at this whatsoever.
I'm not surprised.
Any guess which country got the most points in all categories?
Oh, wow. Okay, so out of all the countries?
Yes. It's a city-state. I'll give you that clue. So
I would guess that it's somewhere near here.
it is fairly near.
Right.
Near here.
Okay, city-state.
Yes.
Singapore.
맞아요.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Singapore, I think has done well on these assessment tests. But I've heard that it was a little bit worrisome, or they were worried because we had COVID.
Sure.
And then they were worried about how students might not have been getting the adequate education during those 2 or so years where they weren't able to go to school. So they were worried that the scores would have gone down. But surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, because I think the education system here, they did a pretty good job of trying to get the students back to school and trying to maintain the status quo. So they were able to do well, but it wasn't the same for a lot of countries.
No, a lot of, especially the countries that, as you mentioned, during COVID had those very strict lockdowns. A lot of students in those countries slipped in all these categories.
그래서 이 OECD 국가들 중에서는 굉장히 읽기, 수학, 과학 이런 부분에서 굉장히 그 상위권, 최상위권에 있었고 또 전체 국가들 중에서도 상위권에 있었다고 하는데 특히 이 이제 조사 기관에서는 이 OECD 국가들뿐만 아니라 다른 국가에서도 그 코로나 기간 동안에 그 학습 공백이 학생들한테 어떤 영향을 미치는지 이런 영향을 조사를 하고 있었다고 합니다. 근데 다행히 한국 학생들은 그 기간 동안에도 굉장히 열심히 공부를 하고 또 학교에서 뭐 온라인 수업이나 이런 대처를 굉장히 빠르게 해서 그 공백을 잘 메꿀 수 있었다고 하는데요. 다른 나라에서는 또 이 상황이 그렇지 못했다고 합니다. 그래서 점수가 많이 떨어진 경우도 있었다고 합니다. So let's take a look at some of the expressions that were used here. They described South Korean students as the top performer.
That's right. Top performers. In this case, we're talking about students with the best scores.
Yes.
You'll see this a lot in sports too. So like one of the sports apps that I use a lot, if I want to see what happened in a particular game, I click on that game and then it'll give me a recap and it'll always show me the top performers from both teams,
Right.
which players played the best,
Right.
whatever sport it is.
Right, the number one ranking team or
In this case, performers, we're talking about players or students.
Right, right.
Exactly.
그래서 그 가장 좋은 또는 최고의 성적을 낸 사람. 그래서 top performer이고요. What about peer?
Peers, these are people who are, either the same age as you. It can also be people who are of the same social status as you. It can also be people who do the same type of job as you as well. So at work, like your coworkers, if you're all kind of in the same level and in the company, you
Yeah.
could also refer to them as your peers.
Right, right. 그래서 뭐 나이가 꼭 같지 않아도 어떤 신분이나 뭐 회사에서 동료들도 peer이라고 설명을 할 수 있는데요. You have an example sentence for us?
I think I do. Yeah, he's very popular with his peers.
그래서 그 또래, 동년배 사이에서 굉장히 인기가 많다 이런 얘기죠. 자, 한번 다시 읽어볼게요. South Korean 15-year-olds were among the top performers in mathematics, reading, and science among their peers from OECD member nations, according to the latest report by the organization's Program for International Student Assessment. Okay, let's move on to the second headline.
Global credit rating agency Moody's has downgraded its outlook for China's sovereign bonds from stable to negative, saying the country is facing risks from a slowing economy and a crisis in its property sector.
Alright. 국제 신용평가사 무디스가 경기 둔화 및 부동산 부문 위기를 이유로 중국의 국가 신용등급 전망을 안정적에서 부정적으로 하향 조정했습니다. Let's take a look at the news first.
Sure. So you might think that they've actually downgraded their credit rating when you first look at this or read this headline, but that's not the case. It's just their outlook, what they think about these bonds.
Right.
Now Moody's has maintained China's credit rating at A1, which is its fifth highest. It's not even one of the highest rated bonds. But lowering this outlook is viewed as a sign that they could cut the credit rating in the near future, and that would be quite disastrous for the Chinese government.
Right.
They weren't even happy about this. The Chinese government said they were disappointed by this. They called their economy resilient. But certainly Moody's has warned that Beijing may, in the near future, have to bail out local governments, regional governments, as well as state-owned companies that are all struggling with rising debts, and especially in their property sector.
Yeah.
A lot of their housing developers, large construction companies, some of the largest ones, they're facing insolvency. Many have stopped building. Evergrande is one people may have heard of. It was at one point in time, it was the largest developer in China. They're saying now Evergrande owes approximately $300 billion, and most of it is to customers whose properties were never built.
Oh, wow. 이게 그러니까 부동산이 문제인데, these days though, what happens in one country doesn't stay there. It has ripple effects all over the world.
Sure does.
So, what's kind of worrisome for us is what happens here if the economy starts to sink in China, it could start to have a ripple effect all over the world
It
because
certainly
it's
will.
such a big economy.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And then you also have to wonder what a communist government will do when they're backed up against the wall. Many experts that I listen to fear that when China's growth starts to slump more, will they look for other ways to kind of sort of spur that national enthusiasm?
Right.
If history is any indication, we're going to have to be very careful with the with the way China acts in the near future.
그렇죠. 이제 무디스가 2024년하고 2025년에 중국의 그 연간 국내 생산 GDP 성장률이 한 4.0%가 될 것으로 예상을 했다고 하는데요. 올해 중국의 연간 경제 성장률이 정부의 목표치인 약 5% 정도를 달성할 것으로 보이나 2026년에서 2030년에는 평균 한 3.8% 정도로 둔화할 것으로 내다보고 있고 지금 경제 상황이 그렇게 좋지는 않은 상황인 것 같아요. So let's take a look at the expression. There was the expression stable.
Stable means a few things. In this case, it means it doesn't change. So if we talk about stable prices, for example, a lot of times you'll talk about someone has a stable job, meaning it's steady.
Right.
It's not gonna change. If someone's in the hospital and they're, obviously they're sick, but their condition isn't worsening, we'll say they're in stable condition.
Right.
And also you can talk about structures, actual physical structures. If they're solid, we'll say they're stable.
지금 방금 말씀하신 병원에서 쓰일 수가 있어요. 병원에서 컨디션이 스테이블하다 그러면 안정적이다. 지금 컨디션이 괜찮다. 약간 이런 의미로 쓰일 수가 있고요. 그래서 안정적이고 건축물이 스테이블하다, 안정적이다. 이런 표현으로도 쓸 수 있고요. Can you give us your example sentence?
We plan on keeping our prices stable next year.
이 얘기는 내년에는 가격을 올리지 않겠다 이런 얘기죠. We'll keep our prices stable. 이 상태로 유지를 하겠다 이런 얘기입니다.
It's funny, we're talking about Mariah Carey. She's often been called an unstable person in the past. Eminem called her that. A lot of people have said it.
네,
Yeah, if you're
왔다 갔다.
unstable,
네.
maybe your mental health isn't
그렇죠.
so
이제
good.
조금 불안하고 그런 사람한테 조금 unstable하다 이런 얘기를 할 수 있습니다.
I've never been called unstable in my life. Have you?
Don't
answer that.
I feel like there are moments where I feel unstable.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yes.
Everybody
Yes.
does. I feel it when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah. And we also talked about the property sector.
Sure. Anytime you see sector, you're talking about a part of an economy. So in this case, we're talking about the part of the economy related to properties, housing, buildings. You'll also hear a lot about the public sector and the private sector.
Right.
So if you talk about the public sector, you're referring to what the government owns and controls. The private sector would be private individuals, the part of the economy that they control, so private companies.
Yeah. Yeah. 이 property sector 그런 부동산 부문이나 어떤 sector 그런 분야를 얘기하는데 private sector, public sector 이 얘기도 굉장히 많이 나오죠. 이 공공 분야 그다음에 뭐 사기업 할 때 private sector 이렇게 얘기를 하고요. property 그러면은 부동산 얘기를 하는 겁니다. 제가 다시 얘기를 해볼게요. Global credit rating agency Moody's has downgraded its outlook for China's sovereign bonds from stable to negative, saying the country is facing risks from a slowing economy and a crisis in its property sector.
Technology startup has launched the first commercially available whole genome sequencing test for embryos, designed for couples undergoing in vitro fertilization treatment.
한 생식 기술 스타트업이 시험관 아기 시술을 받는 커플을 대상으로 아기의 선천적 결함 등을 사전에 확인할 수 있는 배아용 유전체 염기 서열 분석 검사를 최초로 출시했습니다. Let's take a look at the news first.
So this company that I mentioned here, the reproductive technology startup, is called Orchid. On Tuesday, they announced this comprehensive new genetic test. And as we mentioned, it's for couples who are undergoing IVF, which is a treatment for people who are experiencing infertility or they're at risk of passing on genetic problems, usually due to age.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big issues there. And
Right.
this test now, it's not going to be cheap. It's going to cost, I think, around $2,500 I saw. So it won't be cheap, but nonetheless, this test will help people identify whether their embryos present any genetic risks like birth defects, neurodevelopmental disorders, chromosomal abnormalities, So many different things they'll be able to detect. In the past, these things were only or even right now, they're only detectable after the birth of the baby.
Right, right. 이게 굉장히 획기적인 기술이긴 한데요. 이미 몇 개 큰 도시에서는 이게 가능하다고 합니다. I think they said that in major cities, a few of the major cities, it is already available, and they're trying to make it available for most of the major cities
Sure,
in the
everywhere,
US.
yeah.
Right.
You can request it apparently.
Right. And it was kind of a shock to me. Well, not really a shock because I know how expensive medical care is in the U.S. But IVF treatment is, I heard, about $12,000.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And then they said that for this, just to get the sequencing, it would cost about $3,000, a little over
I think I saw.
$3,000.
Oh, okay, the report I read had $2,500, but yeah,
Okay.
in that area
About
between $2,000 and $3,000
to $3,000.
So the whole process here is now it's going to be about $15,000,
Right.
So not
Right.
everyone can really do that. But
Right. 그래서 이 한국에서는 이게 그래도 조금 더 it's a little bit more accessible, I feel like, in
Sure.
Korea.
Right.
The cost-wise. 그래서 그런 생각을 좀 해봤고요. Let's take a look at some of the expressions. They said that it's the first commercially available whole genome sequencing test.
So when something is commercially available, it means it's available for purchase. You can buy it. Consumers can buy it.
Right. Commercially available 그러면 저희가 살 수 있는 거예요. 이 시중에서 판매되는 이런 의미입니다. And then they talked about couples undergoing in vitro fertilization treatment, which is also known as IVF.
So when you undergo something, you go through that, you experience it, and it's usually something difficult or possibly painful. It's used all the time for medical procedures.
Right.
Oh, I'm undergoing a medical procedure. She underwent a medical procedure.
Right. 이 undergo라는 단어는 뭔가를 받다, 어떤 거를 겪다 이런 의미로 쓰이는데 보통은 조금 힘들거나 어려운 일을 겪다 할 때 많이 쓰입니다. 그래서 선생님이 지금 말씀하신 뭔가 의료적인 치료를 받을 때 많이 쓰여요. 그래서 예를 들어 뭐 항암 치료를 받다. 그럼 she's undergoing chemotherapy.
Yeah.
네, 이렇게 조금 어려운 힘든 그런 치료를 받고 있을 때 많이 쓰입니다.
Yeah, it's never for fun things. It's
맞아요.
never like you're undergoing a party
No.
or undergoing a buffet. Like it's never something like that.
맞아요. 이렇게 재밌거나 즐거운 일에는 잘 쓰이지 않고 어려운 일에 많이 쓰입니다. Can you give us your example sentence?
I'm undergoing a procedure tomorrow. Wish me luck. That's not true.
But not
Just
true.
just a sentence.
Not true.
You
맞아요.
could say that for perhaps at work or something like you might say it to a coworker if you're taking the next day off because you're going to actually have a medical
맞아요.
procedure.
맞아요. 그래서 이런 문장은 I'm undergoing a procedure tomorrow 이런 얘기는 내일 뭔가 뭐 예를 들어서 병원에서 뭔가 수술을 받거나 시술을 받을 것이다. 그러니까 wish me luck. 행운을 빌어줘. 이런 얘기를 할 때 많이 쓰이고 있습니다. 자, 그럼 제가 한번 다시 읽어볼게요. A reproductive technology startup has launched the first commercially available whole genome sequencing test for embryos designed for couples undergoing in vitro fertilization treatment. Okay,
11-year-old paper check from the Apple Computer Company written out and signed by Steve Jobs for the amount of $4.01 has been put on the online auction block.
47년 전 스티브 잡스가 애플 컴퓨터 컴퍼니 이름으로 발행하고 직접 서명한 $4 1센트, 우리 돈으로 약 5,000원 액수의 수표가 온라인 경매의 매물로 나왔습니다. Let's take a look at the news first.
So this check was signed by Steve Jobs, and he gave it to Radio Shack,
Yeah.
which was a very popular electronics store in the 80s and 90s. It's since gone bankrupt, doesn't exist anymore.
know,
so I feel it's
yeah.
okay to give them a shout out because they don't exist anymore. Now they're saying this check, they expect it to fetch more than $20,000. So as like the auction is due to end Thursday in the U.S. This auction house is in Boston, so it's going to end in a couple hours.
Yeah.
They'd already the article that I read, they'd said they'd already had more than 20 bids.
Yeah.
The highest bid already was $22,444. Now you might wonder, okay, why is this so valuable? They say any items signed by Steve Jobs are worth so much because they're rare.
Of course.
Because Steve Jobs famously did not give autographs.
Oh.
He only ate fruit and never gave autographs.
Yeah, he only ate fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I, saw a picture of this this check.
Okay.
And he signs his name very interestingly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he doesn't use capital letters.
Okay.
And he signed it Stephen Jobs, all lowercase.
Really?
And you can see clearly it's Stephen Jobs.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think, if you buy this, if you win it, or if you win the bid at the auction, it will be worth a lot more later on.
Could be.
Yeah. So I heard during the auction there's going to be other Apple related items that will be on the auction block, like the first generation iPhone that came out, that wasn't unpacked and stuff like that.
Okay.
I heard those are worth a lot.
I can imagine, right?
Yeah,
Well,
if
tech
I
people.
I think I read in the paper that if you have an old, iPhone that's lying around, the first generation, the
Okay.
first ones that came out, don't open it, just leave it, and then sell it later on because they're worth quite a lot.
Oh no, I had like 3 or 4 old iPhones at home, and I think my wife might have thrown them out.
Oh
no.
No, you have to hang on to those.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are interested, you might want to check out the news later on and see how much it actually sold for, because I'm sure it will make the news. 이거 아마 얼마에 팔렸는지 나중에 기사로 나올 것 같아요. 근데 이 체크 이제 기사들 찾아보시면 체크 사진이 나오거든요. 근데 스티브 잡스가 아까 선생님 말씀하신 것처럼 사인을 안 하기로 굉장히 유명해요. 그래서 이게 굉장히 높은 가격에 팔릴 것이라는 얘기가 있는 거고요. 보시면은 사인을 예전에는 미국에서 이렇게 뭐 지금도 많이 할 것 같긴 한데 수표를 많이 썼어요. 그래서 $4 1센트 이렇게 써 있고 그 사인을 굉장히 특이하게 스티브 잡스라고 저희가 굉장히 많이 부르는데 스티븐 잡스라고 써 있고 그 대문자로 안 쓰고 다 소문자로 써 있습니다. 그래서 한번 찾아보시면 재밌을 것 같아요. So let's take a look at the expressions that were used here. He signed it.
That means he wrote his name or his signature. Usually when we say you sign something, it's your signature.
Right.
So many people, their signature is just like a scribble. You
can't tell.
You can't really tell what it says, or it's hard to read.
Right.
Like when I was a kid, after hockey games, we would always try to get players to sign
Yeah.
your ticket or sign your magazine, which is called a program.
But you can't tell who signed it.
It's difficult, or sometimes you can tell, right? Some autographs you can tell if you look closely at it.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of a difference between an autograph and when you sign something, right? An autograph is when you ask someone for their autograph, like a famous person,
Right.
and they sign their name.
That's right.
But when we talk about signing something, it's, for documents, and when you're, signing like
Contracts.
a check, contract.
Sure.
그러니까 사인을 하는 거는 어떤 뭐 서류나 이런 뭐 계약서 이런 데 이름을 서명을 할 때 사인을 하는 거고요. autograph 같은 거는 이제 여기서 좀 사인해 주세요 하고 유명한 사람한테 가서 사인해 주세요 부탁을 할 때 autograph라고 합니다. 유명한 사람의 자기의 그 signature 이름을 사인할 때는 autograph라는 표현도 쓰입니다. Can you give us your example sentence?
This is actually a true story.
Yeah.
Bong Joon-gun signed a baseball for me
Yeah.
a few years ago when I did an interview with him.
He was with the Braves when I
Oh,
lived
yeah?
in
Really?
Atlanta. Yeah. So he was I never actually saw him, but I
Okay.
did go see Atlanta Braves game, so
Oh,
he was
nice.
there. Yeah. But he lived in our neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah.
He told me a lot about his time there.
In Atlanta.
Yeah, because I was so interested in that because the pitching staff was so popular at that time.
Yeah,
John Smoltz and
yeah,
Greg Maddux.
yeah.
So he told me a lot of...
Glavin, Maddox, and
and then so he told me a lot of stuff. Well, you know your baseball.
I only know that time. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that era, right?
Yeah.
But still, wow, you threw out some names. I'm very
Yeah.
surprised. So he told me a lot about them.
I'm sure.
Really
I would
interesting.
have been very interested to meet him. But anyway, so 봉준군 야구 선수 굉장히 유명한 선수죠. Signed a baseball for me. 야구 선수인데 그 야구 공을 저를 위해 서명을 해줬다 이런 얘기죠. And so Steve Jobs' check was put on the auction block.
So nowadays, auctions are online usually,
Yeah.
right? So it just means it was put up for auction. But in the past, when there were live auctions, an auctioneer would actually stand on this platform where he would, going once, going twice.
Yeah.
Do I have another? Do I have another?
Yeah. And then we hear the
Yeah,
bang, bang, bang.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they're on this raised platform and they're selling the products or conducting the auction, I guess you would say.
Okay. Alright. So 이것은 put on the auction block. 예전에는 진짜 땅땅땅 치고 그게 있었기 때문에 그 블럭이라고 해서 거기 위에 진짜 실제로 올려놓고 했기 때문에 이 표현이 쓰이는 거고요. 경매에 내놓다. 최고 입찰자에게 경매되다. 이런 표현입니다. 제가 한번 다시 읽어볼게요. A 47-year-old paper check from the Apple Computer Company written out and signed by Steve Jobs for the amount of $4.01 has been put on the online auction block. Let's move on to the final headline.
Forbes magazine has released its annual World's 100 Most Powerful Women list, featuring female figures from all fields around the world.
미국 경제지 포브스가 전 세계 각계에서 활약 중인 여성을 모은 가장 영향력 있는 여성 100인의 올해 리스트를 공개했습니다. Let's take a compact look at the news first.
I'll give you some of the top. I'll give the top 5 here, which is quite interesting. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she was number 1. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde, number 2. Kamala Harris, number 3. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, number 4. And number 5 is quite interesting because she went from 79th last year to 5th this year. Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. So we see these, very powerful political people in charge of international organizations or in charge of countries. And then we see a worldwide global pop star at number 5. So
Right.
I think they did talk about how, this rise, the rise of prominence of pop stars, because Beyonce was, I think, in 80th place last year, and she rose to 36th place as well. So they were talking about how, maybe media, maybe pop culture, the influence of pop culture and the influence celebrities have these days, they wield a lot more influence than in the past.
Right, because they can just post a picture or tweet something and millions and millions of people see it instantly.
It goes out,
How many people are really sitting there listening to a Kamala Harris press conference, right? Some people are, but I think more people are interested in what Taylor Swift has to
Right,
say.
and it's kind of a double-edged sword because what they say, because of that influence, what these pop stars say, they really have to be careful, their actions and their words, because so many people are watching.
Have you seen how Taylor Swift is now she goes to all these NFL games now? Have you heard about it? Because she's dating Travis Kelce, a very famous NFL player. So she's at these NFL games and they show her constantly on TV. So hardcore football fans are kind of rebelling against that. But at the same time, she's actually getting so many more eyeballs on the sport.
Right.
And Travis Kelce's selling way many more jerseys now.
Right. 그리고 또 한국 분들이 이 100위권 안에 드신 분들이 있습니다. 그 삼성의 그 이부진 신라의 이부진 회장님께서 오르시고 또 네이버 CEO 최수연이 96위였습니다. So let's talk about the expressions. There was annual. It's an annual list.
That means it comes out every year. If you hear annual, you know it happens on a yearly basis, once a year.
매년, 그러니까 연간에 한 해 이런 의미이고요. 매년 뭔가 발간이 되는 것은 annual, annual 출판물, annual publishment 이런 얘기를, publication 이런 얘기를 합니다. Can you give us your example sentence?
The amount of annual leave you receive increases every year. So you might ask about that. It's the amount of paid vacation you get.
Right. Annual leave는 저희 연차를 얘기를 하죠. 그래서 그 매년 이 증가한다 이런 얘기고요. What's a figure?
In this case, we're talking about people. We're talking about well-known or important people. Figures can also mean numbers as well.
Yeah.
So quite a few different meanings for figure shapes, all kinds of different things. But in this case, we can see that it says featuring female figures, so we know we're talking about well-known and important women.
네, 그 figure이 지금 선생님 말씀하신 것처럼 어떤 뭐 숫자나 shape, 모양도 얘기할 수 있는데 저희 이 기사에서는 인물을 얘기를 하고 있습니다. Important female figures, 그러니까 여성 인물, 명사에 대해서 얘기를 하고 있습니다. 제가 한번 다시 읽어볼게요. Forbes magazine has released its annual World's 100 Most Powerful Powerful Women list featuring female figures from all fields around the world.